Do you know much about ghosts?
Haley asked. She kept her face turned away from me, the orange and purple glow shining ahead into the darkness. I think she was trying to be considerate. Until a few minutes ago, I didn't think they existed. The words were hard to get out, both because I was winded from the fall and because my attention was preoccupied with the light shining from Haley's left eye.
I figured,
she replied.
Most people still don't.
The tunnel continued sloping gently upward, and thankfully didn't seem to be getting any narrower, though occasional stalagmites attempted to bar our path.
Everyone becomes a ghost,
Haley said. Her voice was low.
Nobody can escape that.
The light flickered for a second. I realized that she must have blinked.
I don't think it's supposed to be that way. I think something went wrong, for lack of a better word, on some cosmic scale.
I don't know if she was talking to me or herself, but she continued regardless.
Hellgates. That's what exorcists call them. I don't think they're gates of any sort, though. More like places where the world stops working.
She paused for a breath. I guess the fall hurt her more than she was letting on, too.
They can appear anywhere. As small as an atom, or as big as a galaxy, according to a professor I spoke to. He keeps his research secret, mostly. But there are others that study them. I've heard the government even has a special group that tries to track them. Hellgates are the reason ghosts exist. They let out this radiation, the scientists call it. It does something to the human soul. Prevents it from moving on to the next world. So they're trapped as ghosts. It's normally invisible, but if it's really concentrated, you can see it. It's got a very distinctive appearance. A swirling orange and purple glow.
She turned to face me then. Her left eye was a violent storm of churning orange and purple light, infinitely deep. I felt a horrible pain in the depths of my bones, like my bone marrow was being ripped from my body.
Of course. If you're close enough to see it, you're probably already dead,
she said, turning away from me, and it was like an immense pressure was lifted from my soul.
Being that close to a hellgate basically disintegrates anything. It's impossible to survive being that close to one.
Your eye? It was all I could muster. Haley nodded, not looking back.
I was born like this. Doctors and psychics. I've seen them all. And they can't explain it. According to them, my head should have imploded even before I was born. They don't understand why.
I caught a faint note of smugness in her voice. And you do? She shrugged.
You could say it's my inheritance, I guess. Not that knowing that really does me any good.
Can it be removed? She shook her head.
Too risky. If something does disturb it, the result would be the instant death of me and anyone in a 50-foot radius, at minimum.
She said it so casually, like she was talking about a bad haircut. So that's why you keep it covered. She shook her head again.
Nah. If all I did was bother people around me, I'd just wear colored contacts or something.
Then why? She sighed.
Because there are things I don't want to see.
Up ahead, a faint light appeared. Not the cold white of the ghosts, nor the horrible purple and orange swirl of Haley's eye, but a deep orange and red of sunset. The air felt warmer, fresher. Haley muttered something. I didn't catch the words, but there was obvious relief in her voice as she tied the eye patch back around her head, and the orange and purple glow vanished. Haley stepped out before me.
Watch your step,
she called back. I saw why as I exited. The cave mouth had deposited us on the edge of a very steep cliff. It was a sheer drop downwards, down to the base of the mountain, so far down that the trees looked like tiny green dots, and even further below down the canyon that had, until recently, been a deep, roaring river.
Not getting down that way.
Haley muttered, inching her way along the cliff. We had exited into an indentation in the mountain. More stone above us, acting as a natural ceiling, made climbing impossible, and below us was a flat drop, too steep to scale. To the side, however, the indentation widened, and then widened more. And before long, we found ourselves in the ruins of a Pueblo village. Huh, I didn't know any of these were here. I muttered, surprised. Haley nodded.
I don't think anyone did,
she said. Then her expression turned thoughtful.
Well, not publicly.
What do you mean? She locked eyes. Well, with me.
The company that bought up all the land around here and dammed the river.
They were looking for gold, right? She shook her head.
That's what they said. But maybe they were looking for this.
Why? A distant look came over her.
Like I said, this place is old. There's a lot of spiritual energy here, waiting for release.
My awe vanished, replaced by fear. The ghosts. She nodded.
I bet they originated here.
I felt a cold, prickling sensation down the back of my neck. Then we need to get out of... She cut me off.
Ghosts are stronger underground. They'll show up here once it's dark. But we'll have an easier time hiding out here than in the caves.
She spoke with the voice of experience. Something told me not to argue.
Let's explore a little more.
I wasn't sure if Haley was hiding her fear, or if she was actually not afraid anymore. But either way, there was a strength in her voice. I wish I could say I felt the same, but all I felt was nauseous.
Ghosts can't usually manifest like that. So if something is giving them power, we can find a clue here.
I nodded. I was worried that I would vomit if I tried to speak. Haley moved towards the center of the little village. A circular indentation had been carved into the ground here, large enough for a dozen people to stand shoulder to shoulder around the perimeter, and a cracked stone basin sat in the middle. A worn path led from the indentation right to the edge of the cliff. Haley leaned over the edge, her body loose and expression unconcerned. I felt a sense of vertigo just looking at her.
Damn, that's what I thought.
Haley muttered. What?
Come look.
I'd rather not. Haley sighed and stepped back from the edge.
The canyon down there. I think I see a doorway.
A doorway? She nodded.
There's another type of hellgate. A huge stone doorway. Nobody knows where they came from, but you can find them anywhere. I've even heard of some at the very bottom of the sea. And depending on what conspiracy theorists you listen to, the reason we don't go to the moon anymore is because a bunch of fully open doorways were found up there, too.
She shrugged.
The point is, they're much more dangerous than a normal hellgate, because they never fade away. And as far as anyone knows, they're totally indestructible. And unless I'm totally mistaken, I'm seeing an open one down there.
How do you know all of this? Haley gave me another odd look.
Does it matter?
She didn't give me the chance to reply.
My point is, I think I know what happened here.
You do? She nodded.
Yeah, but it's probably easier to show you.
She looked up at the sky.
The sun hasn't fully set yet. It's probably still safe.
Before I could ask what she meant, she had removed her eye patch. The orange and purple glow filled the small village.
Place is full of death. Slaughter leaves behind memories.
Her voice was completely monotone.
Keep your eye on the basin. And don't make eye contact. With anything.
As she spoke, human voices formed around the basin. Men wearing wooden masks circled the basin as a woman, her body painted with the same strange symbols we'd seen in the cave, emerged from one of the dwellings and climbed into the basin. After a few minutes, she stood, walked to the cliff's edge, and cast herself into the darkness. And the scene began to repeat. Or at first it seemed to be repeating. After a moment, I realized the people were different. It repeated again and again, each time with a different cast.
What is this?
I finally managed to speak.
A ritual.
Haley answered.
Sacrifice of a woman with strong spiritual power to keep the hellgates doors closed. You'll find similar things in many ancient cultures, and some modern ones.
She opened her mouth to speak again, then suddenly gave a strangled gasp and collapsed to the ground.
Haley!
I ran toward her and knelt by her side. Blood seeped from her left eye, a deep red, almost black.
She's here.
Haley managed to gasp, looking at something behind me. Turning back to look at the basin, I saw the scene had changed. A woman, impossibly tall, hovered several feet above the basin. Her tangled hair fell between her feet, wrapping around the basin. Every inch of her body was covered in strange scars, looking like they had been carved with a large blade. She extended her hand, and the water in the basin turned pure black. And then, she turned and looked at me. The instant her white eyes met mine, my vision turned to a swirling vortex of orange and purple lightning. My body began shivering uncontrollably, and the contents of my stomach forced themselves out of my mouth. I don't know how much time had passed, but the sun had fully set by the time I regained control of myself. Haley sat beside me, her eye patch reapplied. Blood continued to seep from behind it, but her expression was calm once more.
I'm sorry,
she said quietly.
I didn't think she would.
She took a deep breath and stood.
I understand now, at least. Come on, we need to move. The ghost will start coming out soon.
I struggled to my feet, still shaking uncontrollably, and followed after her as she ducked inside the nearest dwelling. As I watched, she took a piece of broken pottery from the floor and scratched some symbols into the floor.
Haley, that woman, she...
Don't!
I froze at the violence in her voice. She closed her eyes tightly and was silent for a few seconds.
Sorry. Just promise me. Promise me you'll never ask about that woman or do any research about her. For your sake. Don't ask me. Don't ask anyone. Promise me.
I did. I've done my best to not give too many details about what I saw. But even so, anyone reading this, let it go. The look in Haley's eye as she said that. It was the only time I ever saw that expression in her face. Something beyond terror. Haley turned away from me and continued scratching at the floor for another minute, then tossed the shard outside and leaned against the far wall.
The ghost's here. If I'm right about how they died, they'll probably spend the night reenacting their deaths on a loop. As long as you don't look at them, they probably won't notice us. Just turn your back away from the entrance and don't look. No matter what you hear, don't look until dawn.
And if you're wrong?
My voice was shaking. Haley grimaced.
Then hopefully we both die quickly.
Haley, what did you figure out?
She lay down on her back and gazed at the ceiling.
We don't want to attract their attention, so we should keep quiet until morning. I'll explain as best I can when the sun rises.
It goes without saying, I didn't sleep that night. As soon as the last rays of sun faded, wet shuffling sounds began to echo throughout the village, mixed with strange hollow sounds, like wind blowing across a bottle. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. A chill ran down the length of my body. The wet shuffling and hollow moans echoed endlessly, and I swear I felt something breathing right on the back of my head. As I pressed my hands over my ears and tried to squeeze my eyes even tighter shut, I remember noticing, going by the sound of her rhythmic breaths, Haley was already asleep. It was as if time slowed to a crawl. The sensation of something breathing down my spine, the cold air that flowed from nowhere, the wet shuffling sounds, the aching deep in my bones. I felt it would never end. And yet, seemingly moments later, I was roused by the sudden shock of Haley shaking me. Somehow, it was morning.
Did you get any sleep?
She asked, yawning and rubbing her eye patch. Of course not.
I slept pretty well, actually.
She stretched and I heard a loud pop in her back.
Other than the ground being too hard.
She stood and peeked outside.
Looks like the ghosts are faded. We can leave safely now.
Can you tell me what you figured out first?
It seems pretty simple, though this is just a guess. I think what happened is the sacrificial ritual, the one to keep the hellgate closed, got corrupted. A powerful, malicious spirit, the scarred woman, tainted the water used to purify the woman being sacrificed. So, when she leapt off the cliff down to the hellgate, instead of sealing the gate for another generation, she opened it. It's not that uncommon, really. Sealing rituals tend to be a matter of guesswork, and it works because you think it will work. So it's pretty easy for them to go wrong and end up unsealing the hellgate instead. Anyway, the hellgate opened, and the blast of energy from it probably instantly killed everyone in the surrounding area, and turned them into the ghosts we saw. The real issue is why nobody before us reported anything like this. I mean, this village might be hidden, but I saw some lesser ghosts wandering around when we were hiking.
You did?
She shrugged again.
I see ghosts everywhere. It's usually not worth commenting on.
I followed her outside into the sunlight. She pointed, and I followed where she was pointing. Another cave opening on the far side of the village.
That looks like it's sloping down,
she said.
Probably our best shot at getting back to the hiking trail.
I nodded and followed behind her as she ducked into the crevice. Being quite a bit taller than her, I found it a lot harder to fit in, and ended up with a number of painful cuts on my scalp. But thankfully the tunnel opened up before long, and after a few minutes, I could stand.
Do you really think this will lead us out?
I asked after several minutes. Haley nodded.
Call it instinct. I usually just know the direction I need to go.
Is that the same instinct you followed to get us here?
It came out sounding far more bitter than I meant, but Haley didn't seem to notice.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure how to respond, so we continued in silence for close to half an hour, before Haley suddenly came to a stop.
Do you hear that?
I listened. A faint howling echo behind us.
They're following us.
Haley muttered. Without another word, we broke into a run. Behind us, the howling grew louder and the cave flashed with orange and purple lightning. My heart pounded in my chest, my blood echoed in my ears. The horrible ache resonated throughout my bones. My vision filled with spots and I collapsed to the floor. As I struggled to my feet, I saw them flooding down the tunnel behind us. Human forms bent and stretched in bizarre ways. Masses of screaming mouths and writhing hands. Hollow eyes wrapped like chains around bloated bodies. Suddenly, Haley turned to face me.
Run,
she said, her right eye narrowed.
What?
Run, I'll catch up.
I won't abandon-
I'm not sacrificing myself.
She snapped.
I'm just going to delay them. And you don't want to be in the middle. I'll catch up. Now, run.
I wish I could say I bravely stood beside her against the rushing tide of the dead. But self-preservation is stronger than any such noble urge. I turned and ran further down the tunnel. My lungs struggled for air and my throat was sore from gasping, but I kept running. Anytime I started to slow, my mind conjured up images of those translucent arms dragging me back into that formless mass of agonizing screams, and I ran even faster. I don't even know how far I ran. I didn't even look where I was going. I just ran, heedless of the painful rocks scraping against me from every angle. Eventually, though, the adrenaline was no longer enough to keep me going, and everything went dark. Once again, I'm not sure how long I was out, but eventually I became aware of a faint flickering light and forced my eyes open. Haley sat beside me. The entire left side of her face below the eye was caked with a thick layer of dried blood. She had discarded her eye patch in favor of some cloth torn from her shirt, and this cloth too was clearly soaked with blood. She was breathing heavily, but her expression was calm.
Where'd you get the candle?
It's funny the sorts of questions the dazed brain thinks to ask. Haley gestured behind me. Painfully, I forced myself to a sitting position. We were in a large rounded cave. A stack of crates emblazoned with the logo of a well-known company. The very company that had built the dam, in fact, stood against one wall. One such crate was open, revealing a number of candles. Various types of digging equipment littered the floor, along with the smashed remains of a laptop.
It's okay.
Haley said.
The goats aren't following us anymore.
What did you...
I exorcised the weaker ones. The stronger ones will be back before long, but they'll probably just go back to reenacting their deaths. As long as the hellgate is out in the open, this whole mountain will still be haunted. And no amount of exorcisms will change that.
She stood.
Which means, we know what we need to do.
We do?
A mischievous smirk played across her face, highlighted by the dried blood and the dancing flames of the candle.
We need to blow up the dam.